Fights up.
Okay.
Okay, we are live, so Bismillah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Dear panelists, welcome to this webinar on Kashmir. We are happy to have you. The list is looking wonderful. We have international dignitaries, academics, professionals, politicians, and statesmen. Kashmiris and particularly Kashmiri diaspora here would like to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for giving us support and speaking at this panel. I'd like to also thank the listeners. The importance of this particular event today will be obvious to you when I tell you that late last night, a friend of mine, a physician from Kashmir, texted me. He said they have cut their internet, and within 3 minutes of posting this webinar, they blocked it, they deleted it. So the importance is obvious. Not only are they controlling Kashmiri voices on the streets, filling prisons with our people, taking all the liberties off, they are also trying to control their access of Kashmiris to the rest of the world. So these activities are important. Well, let me also tell you, recently, Indians have started mimicking what we have been doing here. We were in Times Square last year at Anga, and they were very curious. Now, in the last few weeks, they are also doing on the Times Square, they are going to have displays, digital displays for India, and they are also starting their own webinars. They have nothing to defend but atrocities in Kashmir, and we have a cause. And with very little time left for all the panelists, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, my friend, Dr. Ghulam Nabi Fai, the Secretary General of World Kashmir Awareness Forum. You all know him, and the audience is also aware of him. He is a symbol of our resistance, and if he is any indication, there are thousands of us like him who are walking in these steps. We will be tortured, will be silenced, but we'll keep on resisting in all political and peaceful ways. With that, I will ask Dr. Fai to please facilitate the session this morning. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Dr. Fai.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mir. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, let me also thank the distinguished scholars and diplomats who are joining us from 4 continents in this Kashmir webinar. As you know, that the title of this webinar is Kashmir, a year in lockdown. Unfortunately, this is the tale of miseries. This is the tale of suffering of the people of Kashmir. Just yesterday, on August 3rd, the government of India issued an order that there will be a perpetual curfew in Kashmir starting from the morning of August 4, which is today, and ending by the end of August 5th. I just want to tell you that curfew in Kashmir means that anything, no matter what, anything that moves on the street will be gunned down. And they have given the reasoning. They have given the reasoning because we have the information that global Kashmiri diaspora all over the world and their friends They are going to observe August 5th as a Black Day. And we have also reported that the people of Kashmir are also going to observe August 5th as a Black Day. So, dear brothers and sisters, the message is very clear. The message is that India has been able to put 9 million people under siege. India has been able to put tens of thousands of people in the jail. The message is clear that India has not been able to win over the hearts and minds of the people of Kashmir. Because even today, during the curfew, the people of Kashmir, they are willing to come to the streets. They are willing to raise the slogans of Azadi. Or those brothers who do not know what Azadi means right to self-determination. And this was the right that was given by the United Nations to the people of Kashmir, and we are still waiting for the implementation of those pledges. So we are so honored to have so many distinguished scholars, as it meant, from 4 continents of the world. So they are going to guide us. They are going to give us some tangible strategy, not only how to ease the miseries of the people of Kashmir, but how to achieve our ultimate objective, which is the right to self-determination. So I have only 2 things for the speakers. Number 1, when you are not speaking, so if you can mute so that we can listen to each other, inshallah, attentively. And secondly, inshallah, every speaker is going to get 8 to 10 minutes. And I have the honor and pleasure to invite one of the great friends of the Kashmiri American community, for matter the people of Kashmir. So who has dedicated his life not only for the cause of Kashmir, but for the cause of oppressed people. So you can see him on the streets of New York, Washington, D.C., and meeting with the officials of State Department and White House and whatnot. Dr. Zahid Bukhari, so he has been the source of inspiration for millions of Muslims of America. He is right now the chairman of ICNA, Council of Social Justice, and he is going to tell us about this latest right-wing ideology in India, Hindutva, and it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Zahid Bukhari.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Dr. Ghulam Nabi Fai, for this kind introduction. Here, I think there's a wonderful, very distinguished panel. I have, when I am presenting some words on Kashmir, I am in a dilemma. Dilemma is that like I'm having same time nightmares and sweet dreams. On one hand, if I see the last 1 year, if I just summarize the last 1 year, I think there are a lot of sweet dreams vis-a-vis the situation of Kashmiris and India and Indian government on the international arena. For example, I think after a long time, after several decades, the Kashmir issue has been globalized or internationalized. In Security Council, they were meeting. The Indian government on the issue of Kashmir and also its behavior towards Muslims and other minorities. I think the Western media and especially American media, they have published so many negative stories of about India. It never published, I think, if we compare with last 2 decades. But this 1 year, American and Western media bashes, I think, the Indian government behavior, and it was unprecedented. Then I think we'll also say that the Modi government, the real agenda, the RSS government, that this is a fascist agenda, this is like Nazi agenda, this is a racist agenda. It has also been very much focused in the globe, and especially the Pakistani government put a lot of focus on in that direction, and it was very much clear that this is, and it is, I think, very easily. It is very easy to understand any Western audience, any Western person, American person, policymakers. They can understand very easily what is fascism is, what is racism is, and what is this the whole agenda of this government. So this has been exposed a lot during 1 year. We see here in the Congress there are 2 hearings in a different type of, and then a lot of questions about the Indian government behavior, and also on Kashmir especially, and also their other immigration, and there are other laws which they have been changing about the minorities, about especially the Muslim community or Muslim population over there. So in that list, if we see that, and then also the Indian government in the local area, in the regional sense, the Indian dominance has been challenged, and with different factors, China's factors, Pakistani factors, from Iran, from Nepal, from Bangladesh, from Sri Lanka, they have been observing very negative attitude about Indian government. And Indian government used to say that they like to they like to they like to make Pakistan alone in their own condition. And Indian government, I think the situation happened 180-degree opposite, and Indian government is feeling that. So in that way, if we make that the sweet dreams type thing, that there are a lot of activities going on. Look at this day, August 5th is coming. All over the globe, probably several, I think some hundreds of webinars are going on about Kashmir issue. So the people are talking about that in every continent. People are talking about Indian government behavior towards Kashmir, about Kashmir freedom, about Kashmiri's right to self-determination, and the word Azadi is also becoming almost part of the English language. So I think all those things, if the dilemma I was saying, that on one hand, this is the condition. We are doing that in from Ikna Council for Social Justice. It's a small contribution, but we have been doing the webinar, the demonstration, the billboard, the working to the Congress people, the senators, all sort of those things we are doing. Here we have U.S. Council for Muslim Organization, an umbrella organization of all Muslim, majority of the Muslim organization in America. So also they did a demonstration in front of India. They had meeting with congressmen, meeting with the State Department, meeting with the other diplomats here. So all those, again on August 5th, we will be having another meeting with the State Department from this U.S. Council for Muslim Organization. So that those things are to look like yes, Kashmir issue is very alive. Kashmir issue has been internationalized. But then the other hand, when we see the situation on the ground, that situation is very tough. Very, very tough, because now the government is a very ideological government, is a fascist government. They have this Hindutva agenda. They are very active in America. They have resources. They have organization. So they have changed the law over there, the Jammu and Kashmir Reconstruction Act, and also Domicile Rule. So they are exactly, they like to do or follow all Israeli policy what they are doing in the West Bank and Palestine. They would like to do, and they are exactly following that footsteps in Kashmir, changing the composition of demographic. They're bringing a Hindu population from India to over there. They are even arresting children or young people and then putting them in different Indian jails. They are putting the curfew, the lockdown. People heard these lockdown words during this COVID-19, but over there the lockdown is going on for the whole 1 year. And also it is becoming an open prison of, I think, the biggest open prison of the world, where 8 to 9 million people are almost in the prison condition. And right now, as Faisa explained, so they put everything right now, all this condition. So my point is, the dilemma is, on the ground, the situation is very tough, and the situation is becoming almost hopeless or helpless, both way. It is becoming that situation. On the international scene, we are seeing the progress. Yes, there are a lot of public opinion and the media. They are saying that, but nothing is being done that could have dent on the Indian policy. So you are the very, I think, high official and academic and all those. I think somehow we should suggest something, that what to do the global community, the international community, because for them the market is more important. For them the business is more important than freedom, than independence. So what to do that there should be some dent on the Indian policy, Indian behavior. I understand that the inner side will be if there are election and BJP got defeated. But what else we can do from the international community here, from the government, from the UN, from the American and the European Union, that there must be some dent in the Indian behavior. That is not coming. So that means nightmares and sweet dreams. At the same time, I am living here, working on this cause. We are feeling that, and we need help to understand how to resolve this dilemma. Thank you very much. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zahid Bukhari. We have Justice Adama Nana. He has to attend another webinar shortly. So we are honored to have him here. Justice Adama Nana is a magistrate from Burkina Faso, and he has held many senior positions in the ministries there, in the judicial system in particular. And since September 2011, he has served as a permanent secretary of Interministerial Committee for Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law. He's an expert, not only that, he's an expert on humanitarian law, but he teaches and he also trains the people for International Development Law Institute. But more importantly, alhamdulillah, as we all know that OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, so they established a very important International Human Rights Commission a few years back, which is really looking into the human rights miseries and suffering of not only Muslims but humanity at large. So Justice Adama Nana is the chairman of that International Human Rights Commission at this time. So it's a pleasure and honor to present to you Justice Adama Nana.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اغفر لي يسر لي ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to take part to this important meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, on behalf of the Independent and Permanent Human Rights Commission of the OIC, I thank the organizer for inviting me to this important event and feel privileged to share my institution's view on one of the oldest in resolve conflict on the agenda of the United States in the OIC. First of all, I would like to apologize for my English. I am from a Francophone country, so I will try to make me understand by you. Both of OIC and the Human Rights Commission attach high importance to the just solution of Kashmir dispute as envisioned by the relevant UN Security Council resolution and vigorously monitor the prevailing human rights situation in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. IPSRC has also established a standing mechanism which regularly monitors the human situation in Indian occupied, which regularly monitoring and pronounce itself on the situation, including issuance of detailed fact-finding report on the subjects. Excellencies, today we all gather in condemning the year-long inhuman, illegal, and the most reprehensible security lockdown and communication blackout in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Since 5 August 2019, the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir is turning into the world's largest prison with several human rights and humanitarian repercussions for the innocent Kashmiri population. The political leadership is incarcerated without any legal recourse, and journalists and human rights activists are being prosecuted on false charge, violence, rape, and molestation of women. is widely used as a method of collective punishment by the Indian security forces, using the protection of draconian laws such as Armed Forces Special Power Act and Public Security Act. Indian security forces also continue to detain, torture, and even kill suspects without any fear of investigation, thus promoting a culture of impunity, which is a serious violation of international human rights law. The worsening humanitarian situation arising due to the inhuman lockdown and closure of economic and social activities has also caused an economic loss of over $2.4 billion to Kashmir economy, besides several hardships for the informed to gain access to healthcare during the ongoing pandemic. Such reprehensive restriction constitute collective punishment of the populace. These deplorable and blatant violation of Kashmiri fundamental human rights, including the right to life, right to freedom of expression, right to peaceful protest and assembly, are also contrary to international human rights law and violative of India's international human rights obligation. Despite persistent global condemnation by the UN, OIC, and other human rights bodies, the government of India, as we know, continues to pursue systematic persecution of Kashmiri Muslims through ongoing vicious political, economical, and communication blackout, even during the festive period, such as Eid. Worse still, here is no respite in sight. Manifestation of these blatant human rights violations under an exclusionary ideology of Hindutva reflect an obvious state bias, which has led to the incidence of genocide alleged by international human rights organizations. However, no amount of tyranny has subsided the resolve of Kashmiri Muslims. The Kashmir conflict has acquired a new dimension. Kashmiri youth has taken upon itself to inadvertently demand the legitimate right to self-determination in a peaceful manner. Through the peaceful demand continue to face the traditional use of indiscriminate and disproportionate use of force, they have shown to the world that generation after generation, Kashmiri remain firm and resolute in demanding and exercising their inalienable right to self-determination. I must emphasize that the Kashmir dispute cannot be seen through the prism of politics alone. India is illegally altering the demographic composition of the Muslim majority in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir by enacting Jammu and Kashmir Grant of Domicile Certificate Rules 2020, causing demographic flooding in non-native in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. An estimated 30,000 people have already been given the message of the report that 2.74 million could occur the message to cover the Muslim majority in Kashmir into a minority. This is a manifest violation of the well-codified international human rights treaty, including Article 27 and 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which clearly prohibits any illicit transfer of population in conflict zone or disputed territory. The OIC and IPRC have repeatedly requested the government of India to allow a fact-finding visit to the IOT to carry out an independent and impartial investigation of the human rights situation. Unfortunately, the government of India continued to defy any request from the international community. In the absence of such permission, our commission delegation undertook a visit to the state of Azad, Kashmir in March 2017. The 2017 visit report made relevant recommendations that are reflected in Council of Foreign Minister resolution and OIC Head of State Summit. It should also be noted that the Commission is the voice of the Jammu and Kashmir causes during its intervention at the level of Human Rights Council and its session of the United Nations General Assembly. During the 16th session of the Commission, during this session, we also have a special which was set aside for the issue of India's occupation of Jammu and Kashmir. On this occasion, all the member states represented were able to understand the legitimacy of the Kashmiri people's struggle and subsequently suggested relevant recommendations that were transcribed in the report and forwarded to member states and the OIC. A brief visit to our website will help convince that the issue of Jammu and Kashmir remain one of our priority mandates. A second follow-up visit in March this year was postponed due to the pandemic-related travel restriction. In its detailed visit report of 2017, the Commission concluded that there is substantial circumstantial evidence to corroborate the allegation of discriminatory and disproportionate use of force by the Indian occupation forces committing violation of human rights. These funding of IPSRC report were later corroborated by the UN Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, publishing its report of 2018 and 2019 on the human rights situation in Jammu and Kashmir. As you know, you can see, we are very concerned by the subject, and we are willing to join to any action in order to find the best solution. IPSRC remains available for any request from any member state to help any action. As Desmond Tutu said, it means a great deal to those who are oppressed to know that they are not alone. I believe today's webinar and other such efforts are important to show Kashmiri Muslims that they are not alone and that the international community stands by them in their legitimate struggle to realize their self-determination. The Commission reminds that the international community, particularly the OIC member states, must take practical measures on multilateral and bilateral level, including using the option of boycott, divestment, and sanction regime to pressurize India to 1. Put an immediate end to the ongoing human rights violation in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. 2. Refrain from altering the geographic and demographic status of India-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. 3. Repeal its discriminatory law, like Armed Forces Special Power Act, which contravene international human rights law and standards. 4. provide unhindered access to the fact-finding visit of the UN and OIC IPSRC, to cooperate in establishment of a commission of inquiry under UN auspices to hold an independent investigation to all human rights violations, and the last one, to implement UN and OIC resolution to allow people of Kashmir to exercise their right to self-determination in the free and fair plebiscite under the UN auspice. That is what I would like to say to all the panelists as our contribution. That is why I can say now we are very, very happy to join your action in order to find the best solution. Thank you very much. I would like to apologize again for my English. I have a problem of tongue, so sometimes pronunciation is very, very difficult for me. Thank you very much. Shukran.
Thank you, Justice Nana. God bless you, and you have really given us some tangible strategy points. Inshallah, we are going to take note of that. And please convey on behalf of the people of Kashmir to the whole commission. So you have played a wonderful role within the past few years and few months in particular. So thank you for your contribution, and may God bless you.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker, how can I introduce? To me, honest to God, she is much more Kashmiri than I am. And I am saying really literally, because she is the one who visited Kashmir more than maybe 3-4 dozen times. And she has been able to meet with every single leader, not only in Azad Kashmir, but also in Indian occupied Kashmir. So she is a graduate of Oxford University, and mashallah, she has also been the president of Oxford University Students' Union. I think they call Student Society. And she has also taught there at St. Anthony College at Oxford. And she has many books and which I have read at least twice: Kashmir in Conflict, India, Pakistan, and Unending War. And she is really a great friend of Kashmir, and I mean Victoria Sheffield. So thank you very much for your participation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Everyone can hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
I had some technical problems earlier. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Fai, and all participants for having me here and talking about Jammu and Kashmir. I'm sorry we're all in our different locations, but I think we're unified in spirit, and that's the main thing. I'm going to address the issue of our seminar today, which is the current situation in Kashmir and the way forward. Unfortunately, none of us are really able to fully understand what the current situation is because we're not in Jammu and Kashmir, but at least we have had some communications. I myself was meant to be going back to the Valley of Kashmir earlier this year, but of course was not able to do so because of COVID restrictions. And I think in some respects, the COVID restrictions have taken our eye off what's going on totally in the Valley, because obviously we've been having to deal with the restrictions in our own countries. But nonetheless, thanks to being able to have a limited contact with people in the Valley of Kashmir, I think we have some idea. And as the previous speaker has indicated, all is not well there. And I think one of the biggest things that I've found following this issue for so many decades is that the people who live in that beautiful Valley of Kashmir don't enjoy the same freedoms that we enjoy. And so one has to ask, why not? They deserve every freedom that we have. They deserve the freedom of movement, the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression. And I think one of the things we've seen over the past year is how that freedom of expression has been restricted. And as a writer and journalist myself, I feel very strongly for my fellow writers and journalists in Kashmir who aren't able to express themselves in the same way that I am. And I really think that this is a matter of extreme concern for all of the international community, because it's one of the tenets, freedom of speech. And if you don't have freedom of speech, you begin to act in a manner which is not illustrative of what you're really thinking. And I know several journalists, you know, because of government funding, they have to write certain things. They cannot write what they really want. One of my friends was taken down to the police station and questioned because he'd reported an activity which is within his professional duty to be able to report. We've heard about the human rights abuses. We know what's going on. And again, I think that this is something that, you know, it's been so long. How much longer do people have to suffer before something is done? And what can be done? What is the way forward? As I said, we've talked about the difficulty of movement, the freedom of expression. All the people who live in the valley are just like us. They want to lead their lives like we want to lead our lives. So what is the way forward? I've addressed this issue so many times in so many seminars and forums. And I always try to be optimistic, but what I do have to say at present, in this 1 year anniversary since August 5th, is that I think the parameters have changed, and we have to recognize that. We have to deal with it. Previously, even talking to Kashmiris, they were always thinking, well, if India and Pakistan can get together, and if we can have a representative voice from amongst the inhabitants of the, as was princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, including the valley, including Jammu, including Ladakh, including Gilgit-Baltistan and the AJK area, Azad Jammu and Kashmir, which is, you know, as we know, the Indians call Pakistan occupied Kashmir. They can't even agree on the name of what the region is called. But if one could have some talks, but I think in this current climate, the situation is very different. I think the vision of the former princely state into 2 union territories, the restrictions that have been reinforced, that these are union territories, they don't even have the element of self-government they used to have, has really, as one of my Kashmiri friends said, it's like you've been playing a game of chess, you've moved one piece, you've moved another piece. It's like the chessboard has been thrown away and a whole new game is beginning. And I think this is very bothersome, and it's been bothersome over this past year. We've had a lot of international condemnation. We've had a lot of international comment. But what actually has changed? Nothing has changed politically. All the promises of better integration that were given by the Indian government, that hasn't been achieved. And I've even spoken to Indians themselves who admit that the government so far has failed. The talk of winning back hearts and minds, and nothing has been achieved in 1 year. They were talking about winning hearts and minds 30 years ago when I wrote my first book, and I'm grateful to Dr. Fai for mentioning that. Actually, this book is now going into its 5th edition, and I wish I didn't have to keep updating it, but I do, because the situation remains unresolved. But what I really feel is that there is no visionary leadership in this. When you have a conflict, when you have a problem, you need to have leaders determined to sit down at the negotiating table and resolve it. And I don't see that visionary leadership. If anything, I see a great deal of obstinacy. And nothing is more illustrative of this than by the new map, which if we all access Wikipedia to see what are the union territories now of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, we see 2 distinct areas. One is Jammu and Kashmir, which includes the whole of that region, notwithstanding part of it is under Pakistani administration. And the other is called Ladakh, which includes Gilgit-Baltistan and the Aksai Chin. So there is no realism here. This is the maximalist position that the whole of this state is part of India. But how can you possibly say the whole of the state is part of India when by India's own admission, they have clashed with the Chinese in the Aksai Chin in the Galwan Valley, which is well inboard of what they claim to be as Ladakh. So what we need is a great deal of realism to look at the situation, to look at the ground realities. And it's pointless saying that this whole area is Ladakh, including the area under Gilgit-Baltistan, with no indication where the line of control is, no indication where the line of actual control is. And so there's going to be no respite for the inhabitants of this state until there is a great degree of realism that this is a political problem. It arose out of the partition and independence of the subcontinent in 1947. But we're getting beyond 70 years. As I say, you know, when I've grown old, others have grown old. This is no longer a fledgling problem. This is a senior citizen problem, where even people who were born when it began are now dying. And you've got a whole new generation. What I'm finding in the lectures I give and the students I meet, they weren't born when the insurgency began in the 1990s, but they are as angry and alienated as were their forebears. And so what's happened is that a whole new generation has grown up. Their lives have been blighted by the lack of resolution that their forebears have not been able to address. And I personally believe that they deserve more than this. They deserve our freedoms, our liberties. Quite apart from their lives, the lives of the entire region are really on hold because of the hostility we see between China, which means that both countries feel it imperative to have huge armies, huge military arsenals, where their money would be better spent with poverty eradication, development, education. Look at their statistics for education. They're not very high compared with the rest of the world. These people need education because they need to be able to get jobs. And so all their lives, the 1 billion in India, the 210 million or so in Pakistan, all their lives are affected by this ongoing situation that has not been resolved since partition in 1947. Their lives are held hostage as well. And I feel, frankly, that as I say, we in the international community have a moral responsibility to continue to highlight this, but also to hold those leaders to task, because it's ultimately the leadership that has to sit down and say, enough is enough. We've allowed too many generations to suffer. What are the statistics now of those killed since 1990s? 70,000? Over 100,000? The Americans lost 55,000 men in the Vietnam War. That was over decades ago. But this is ongoing. And each life, it's not just whether the statistics are large or small, each life is a life. Each family is grieving. I remember when I first went to the Valley of Kashmir in the early 90s to report on the insurgency, there was this saying that not one family has been immune from losing a son in the insurgency. And in the old days, we used to talk about there being no thankful villages after World War I. Imagine how that is, that each family is suffering because they've either had a disappeared or a lost member of that family. So it's not just one individual, but it's a whole family that suffers, and thousands upon families. So I make this sort of journalistic, impassioned, humanist plea that we must keep focused on this issue until we can see the way forward. I don't, unfortunately, see the way forward. I'd like to be more optimistic, but I think I'm an optimistic realist that this is a challenge that we all have to face. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Victoria. God bless you. And you have always been a source of inspiration. Thank you for your contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to say ladies, at least we have one lady in the panel. I have to introduce someone who has really inspired me. And he has really inspired the Kashmiri American diaspora. He is really and undoubtedly a source of inspiration for the whole nation of Palestine. But he has also given the inspiration to millions of people who are oppressed in different parts of the world. A person who has really dedicated his life not only for the cause of Palestine, but for the cause of oppressed people. And by profession, he has been the professor of computer engineering. But like Professor Jamal Badwi, who is a professor of management, but he has been really talking about mostly Islamic issues. Dr. Sami Al-Aryan is the director of Center for Islam and Global Affairs. And he has not only been the symbol of dedication, but he has really been the symbol of sacrifice. So the only common, although we have many commonalities, but one commonality between Dr. Sami and I that we have the same mentor, we have the same guide, and we have the same person who really inspired his family and my family. And I mean Professor Dr. Aga Saeed. We should all pray for his good health, inshallah. So it is really my pleasure and really honor to present to you Dr. Sami Alayan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ghulam, for your kind introduction. And thank you for mentioning Dr. Aga Saeed, who, as you say, we pray for his health. And we need to always honor him and remember him, how he has been working very hard for many causes in the US for many decades. My talk today, I briefly would like to tie the issues. I think these are two of the most important issues of our time, issues that have lingered from the last century to this century, the issue of Kashmir and Palestine. Both were born out of British imperialism of the 19th and 20th century. Both were supposedly going to be solved, or at least they came into being approximately at the same time, 1947, 1948. We have both nations, approximately 13 to 15 million people, who have been struggling for decades to earn and to get and receive their freedom, as well as their self-determination. Both have been struggling for that freedom and self-determination, and they have been struggling under military occupation. Many of the nations of the world have struggled, and they have been freed from a direct military colonial powers. But the Kashmiri and the Palestinian people have been some of the last nations to earn that privilege, or I would say right. Both also have inspired each other. We saw in the Intifada, the Palestinian Intifada in 1987, after decades of military occupation, first in the 1948 birth of the Nakba, and then in 1967 war. As a result, the whole nation of Palestine was occupied. And we also saw 20 years after that, the start of the Palestinian Intifada, where millions of Palestinians had uprisings against the military occupation, the Israeli military occupation in the West Bank and Gaza. We saw a few months later, within 6 months, the Kashmiri people also had their uprising in 1988 against the Indian occupation of the country. We saw that both nations struggle against a racist and xenophobic ideology. In the case of Palestine, the Zionist ideology, which calls for the exclusion of any non-Jew, and it's for an exclusivist state with a colonial settler project in Palestine, where they have been trying for decades to depopulate the Palestinian nation, Palestine. We saw in 1948, about 60% of the Palestinians were exiled, were deported under military force. I'm talking about the Palestinians who existed in the 1948 areas, and ever since, and particularly after 1967, there has been a conscious effort to establish settlements throughout Palestine, which is an ideology that calls for settler colonialist situation. The same has been taking place, particularly in the past year in Kashmir, with the effort to implant a settler colonialist project as well, in order to change the demography of Kashmir. We also see in the case of the Kashmir and Palestine that both had to, both were promised self-determination by the United Nations, or at least an effort, a path towards fulfilling the promise of freedom and self-determination, and both have been denied by their occupiers. Both nations have to endure successive wars. In the case of Palestine, 1948, 56, 67, 73, 82, and the many wars in between, including, of course, the last 3 wars on Gaza. And we also saw the same thing. This is a situation of destabilization of the region in each one. It's a source of friction as well as source of suffering and war and destruction, as we've seen also in the Indian subcontinent. Both nations have been suffering from an increasing rate of poverty, siege, unemployment, basically living a miserable life because of the situation, enslaved by others, being controlled by others, every aspect of life being controlled, simply because of their belief and ethnicity, or both. And that's, of course, a source of concern, not just to the people of the region, but should be a source of concern for the whole world. Both nations have to suffer and are suffering from the use of extrajudicial means by their occupiers. The brutal regimes that have been installed both in the occupied territories in Palestine as well as in Kashmir, the horrific crackdowns on the indigenous populations that have been taking place in order to break their will to resist and to demand their freedoms. Both nations are suffering from thousands of prisoners, including women and children. We've seen that in the case of Palestine with tens of thousands, in the case of Kashmir, and also in the tens of thousands, over 100,000 dead throughout the conflict. In the case of Palestine, it's even more than 100,000 that have been that are dead or have been eliminated. We saw in the case of Kashmir, you have a nation that has the largest army in the world occupying its land, over 750,000, even close to 800,000 people occupying every aspect of the lives of the Kashmiri people. It's simply a state of total occupation, total siege. This maintaining of an occupying army, whether it's the Israeli military occupying Palestinians, or the army of India, the Indian army occupying Kashmir, is a situation that has been left to endure because great powers and the international system have let it happen. And that should not be acceptable in this day and age, where some people enslave others. But it didn't stop there, because we saw also these same international powers for both nations. They provide them with weapons and protection and economic assistance, as we see in the case of Palestine, or they let it go and they deal with them as if nothing is happening in the case of Kashmir. And we saw that in both countries, the xenophobic, the Islamophobic, the racist ideology that is controlling those who are in power, the elites who are controlling both governments, Israel and India, with their hostility to Islam or the religious extremism that has been basically tolerated by world powers, and that should not take place. We also see that the only way forward out of this is to support first to be in solidarity with the steadfastness of the people of Palestine and the people of Kashmir, that we have to maintain the victims. We cannot let them succeed in trying to either depopulate the areas or reach a level of desperation and a level of despair in the case of the Palestinians and the Kashmiri people, because they are the victims of brutalization, yet the people outside must lend their support to them and must show them that their struggle is a true struggle, is sacred struggle, is struggle that has to be supported until they reach their final goal, which is the total emancipation, the total freedom that they deserve like everyone else. Kashmir has become, in the Arab world, a symbol of the Palestine, of the Indian subcontinent, as well as Palestine has become a symbol in that part of the world as being the Palestine of the subcontinent and the Kashmir of the Middle East. That means we need to call for a worldwide solidarity movement. That solidarity movement must be across all ethnicities, across all religions. It must include everyone who cares and who is concerned about freedom and concerned about self-determination and concerned about racism in this world. We've seen the effect of racism recently in the United States. In the case of George Floyd, we saw how a whole movement called Black Lives Matter it transcended continents and transcended ethnicities and race, and how everyone has been supporting their call for racial justice. We saw in the 80s how in South Africa that struggle against apartheid, against racism, against structured racism has also inspired millions of people around the world in order to end apartheid. The same kind of movements we need to establish, we need to launch, we need to organize, mobilize, unite, and start working day and night in order to get the whole people across the world in trying to end the apartheid system in Palestine, as well as the racist policies and occupation of Kashmir. Freedom, our goal should be no less than the freedom of the Kashmiri people and the freedom of the people of Palestine. Our motto should be, from Kashmir to Palestine, occupation is a crime. From Kashmir to Palestine, occupation is a crime. That should be our slogan everywhere. We should never rest until everyone in this around the globe, across this globe, understands that these two people have to have the right to their self-determination and the right to be free of the yoke of tyranny and brutality and occupation. Frantz Fanon once said that each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it. This is our mission. If we are going to be true to our mission, then we should always find ways, tactics, and strategies in order to end the occupation of Palestine and the occupation of Kashmir. Nelson Mandela said, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestine." And I add, our freedom, I'm talking here about across the continents, across the globe, is also incomplete without the freedom of people of Kashmir. We should never forget the people of Kashmir or the people of Palestine. By our silence, we would be complicit in this crime, in this occupation, in the brutalization of both peoples. That means that the people inside the occupied territories, in Palestine, in Kashmir, our first pledge to them is to support their steadfastness and to keep that struggle going. But the people outside have great responsibilities. They have to strategize. They have to identify the weaknesses as well as the strengths of their occupiers and try to weaken their strengths and try to exploit these weaknesses in order to expose the yoke, to expose the ugliness of this occupation and of the impact on this on the whole world, the stability and peace of the world. So I call on all of us to have a unity of vision, a unity of will, and a unity of action. And with these three things, having a solid vision and a strong will and a real action, we can change the situation on the ground. We can force these racist governments in Palestine, in Kashmir, to reverse their racist and xenophobic policies in order to free our people in Palestine and Kashmir. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I'm really looking forward that we can unite these two struggles, which both call for the freedom of the whole world, as well as in Palestine and Kashmir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sami. As you said, we need to have global solidarity movement for all these issues, particularly Palestine and Kashmir. Thank you for your contribution. God bless you. Dr. Ibrahim Bolusho is from Kenya. He has been the professor at Ummah University, Kajiado, Kenya, where he was also the dean as well as registrar. He is the chief executive officer of Waqf Commissioner of Kenya, and he holds his PhD in Islamic jurisprudence. And Dr. Manoti should know him because he has been also teaching at Malaysia. But he's a very close associate and very close friend because we are working together for the last so many years. And he is a member of Istanbul-based one of the very important NGO, which is known as NGOs of the Islamic World and Union of NGOs of Islamic World. So he has been raising the voice of oppressed people all over the world. And I know that he has to join another webinar within few minutes. And I will be following him there, inshallah. So Dr. Ibrahim Buloshu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I first take this opportunity to thank. Do you hear me? I don't know whether do you hear me or.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, you can. Okay. Thank you very much. For the presentation, especially from Madam Victoria Sockfield and Ambassador Munir, Akram, and other presenters. Actually, in lockdown, with the Kashmir has been something which has not been good in the society and in the world. As most of the presentation, which are focusing mainly on the freedom of expression, it is there is a major gap, especially in terms of number of situation, especially since the time of independence of most of the African countries, and decolonization and the process of most of the African countries has brought a variety of challenges and a number of things. When you look at the issue of Kashmir, as well as Palestine, you'll find that most of the countries in the world are focusing mainly, especially in the Asian, side and in the Middle East. You see the focus mostly it will be on Palestine, and we in most of the African countries, you realize that our focus it's more on African issues which are related to a different aspect, especially which is related to the freedom of expression, political instability, and other civil wars which have been happening in most of the countries like Sudan, as well as Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda. So this you find that the aspect of Africa, they are more focusing on most of the African countries. But in related to what we have been seeing and what we have been noticing, especially in Kashmir and the brutality which has been occurring, especially in Kashmir, we realize this thing has made a different or a major issues of instability. They have robbed the freedom, especially the freedom of expression, the freedom of economical freedom, as well as social freedom. In this aspect, we realize that most of the experiences and particularly important problems which are rapidly in different cities, the issues which are related, especially after the expansion, when we are talking about Africa, expansion of city, urbanization, and those all aspects, you realize that there are many things which are lacking, especially in issues of human rights. We have been having challenges of human rights and extrajudicial, killings and a number of aspects. But with the Kashmir and the level of what is happening in Kashmir is really disturbing, and we have to find a way, or a mechanism on how to make sure that these things are done in terms of their stability, and in terms of getting access in education, in social economic development, so that they can be empowered and focused in most of the issues which are related. So in Africa, you find that when generally, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you'll find that most of the issues which are related to the Middle East, it's like not concerned to us, especially, you'll find that maybe individual will be, following in terms of, following the issues, like, some of organization. It's not like the way it's being perceived, on issues of Palestine or other areas. And all is because even we Africans, or most of the African countries, we have our own, issues, we have our own problems. But, in related to what is happening in Kashmir, I think this is an awareness or a program which we have to make sure that we speak on the challenges are facing, and we have awareness programs so that we can speak loud. For instance, if many countries speaking loud, especially in issues which are related to Kashmir or other countries which they are in problems, at least this will make a public awareness, and also it will make those who are violating or those who are oppressing others to be to be aware that there is something wrong, there is a problem, there is something which has to be solved, and this has to happen because of that strength, and because of the support which is administered, or it is developed in such a way that those who are oppressing others would have a break, based on all aspects of oppression. So what I'd like to say is that this forum, is very important, and the talks and also the awareness has to be extended, especially in I remember last time even Dr. Ghulam Nabi Fai, he was concerned and asking whether we have any organization which support or discuss issues of Kashmir. Unfortunately, we don't have in Kenya, but I think this could be a start for us, especially in East Africa, because we have even Dr. Siraj, who is one of the directors of African Foundation for Education and Community Development, and he's also a lecturer at IIUM. And we have been concerned with development aspects of East Africa. I think this could be even one of the issues which we should take it seriously, and see how we can raise our voice in defending and in protecting the interests of Kashmir. With this, brief presentation, I say thank you very much, and I'm really impressed with most of the presentation. I hope you will benefit in terms of the other presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim. And you have given us some practical and tangible suggestions, inshallah. We will take care of that, and we will remain in touch, inshallah. As I said, that we are going to be, inshallah, on another seminar shortly together in Africa. So next speaker is a very close friend, and frankly, he is really a family friend, Professor Dr. Mohammad Nurmanovi. So although he has been the senator, he has been the chairman of board of governors of Sultan Zainul Abidin University, and he has been also the president of ABIM, which is the Muslim Youth Movement of Malaysia. And but more importantly, he has been my friend and very colleague for the last more than 25 years. We have been together at Temple University, Philadelphia, and we had the same mentor, Professor Ismail Faruqi, And when I was along with my family in Malaysia, he was my host. God bless you. Anyone who is in Malaysia, please do visit him. He is a very good cook, inshallah. So, Professor Manoti, it's really my pleasure and honor to present to you to the webinar. Professor Manoti, floor is yours. We can't.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. No, we can't hear you. Professor Munati, we can't hear you.
Azad?
Yes, yes. Now you are okay.
Cepat. Dia tak dengar. Wait a minute.
Yeah, you are okay now.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulil karim wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. My colleague, Dr. Ghulam Nabi Faye, and distinguished panelists who are on webinar tonight. I'm in Malaysia now. It is almost 10 p.m. Yeah. So I'm very much delighted. Somehow or other, Dr. Ghulam has invited me with our distinguished scholars, diplomats, and also social movement activists on this very pertinent issue of Kashmir. A friend of mine also, who is also on webinar at the moment, Brother Mohammad Azmi. He is a president of MAPIM, one of the NGOs, a part of ABIM, which I was president in the 90s. So, frankly speaking, we have been struggling with our brothers from Kashmir, and we in Malaysia have participated in many activities in order to tell Malaysians, not only among Muslims, but also non-Muslims, about the rights of Kashmiri, irrespective of their religion, but it is very, I would say that very unfortunate situation over there. And I just want to say to you that a few days ago, leading newspaper English version, News Times published one editorial, which I will send to Dr. Ghulam Nabi Faye soon. The title of this editorial is Kashmir, a sorry state, still a valley of tears after all these years. Very interesting. And it has been described at the moment because of the nature of Indian government today becoming a very strong superpower of the world, a part of China and of course America. But it is more complicated now than before. After listening to all panelists, including those who are experts on Kashmir just now, I am thinking that Brother Ghulam and other colleagues from Kashmir and others in Pakistan, in India, among Muslims, non-Muslims who are sympathetic to Kashmir, have been doing all multiple forms of activities in order to make sure that Kashmiri will be fully independent. But last year, 2019, on the 4th and 5th of July, if I'm not mistaken, things have been becoming more deplorable in terms of rights of people, and a lot of new political, economic, social, cultural mechanism Indian government has put in Kashmir. And what I am thinking now, this afternoon, before I am on this webinar, I discussed with one of the activists in social works. He was thinking that why not you moot the idea of we try to succumb also from the world environmentalists, looking into the geographical setting of Kashmir, where you have basmati rice and saffron, the two products which are very, very valuable to Kashmiris, to the world. So can we think of how to get the world community through the approach of organic agriculture, looking into basmati and saffron, in order to bring part and parcel with all political activities, diplomatic activities, and also resistance from the people inside Kashmir, in particular among youngsters today, which is becoming more and more important, so that we can see perhaps some sort of more development, progress in terms of efforts to free Kashmir from the yoke of Indian arbitrary colonialism at the moment. So with this kind of approach, multiple approach through agriculture, through environmental process, perhaps the world today will see that the connection of basmati and saffron, perhaps, who knows? I mean, although it might be a little bit alien. I myself this afternoon, I heard this from one of my friends who is an environmentalist who have been walking on the ground, not only in Malaysia, but in many parts of the country, globally. So we try to invite world environmentalists to support the struggle of Kashmiri, apart from politics, diplomatics, and also from the Islamic perspectives. So we will see that some new hopes will be coming in order to see that the struggle for Kashmiri can achieve, although it might not be very soon, but there must be a kind of focus and also strategic in order to bring hopes of the Kashmiri and also people of the world to see that this predicament, which has been there more than 70 years old, then it can be reduced to an extent that many more political developments or diplomatic developments can achieve within these few years. So I think I just want to stop at this moment on this particular issue. Thank you very much for your invitation. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohammad Nurmanovi. Inshallah, God willing, we are going to meet again, either there or here, inshallah. So, dear brothers, I have a pleasure to present to you somebody who has really given us hope. And if I am not mistaken, I think his delegation visited also Azad Kashmir, and they have met with the leadership in Pakistan. So I mean Ustaz Muhammad Azmi Abdul Hamid. So he is the president. As we have in America, we have a lot of Shura councils in Washington, in New York, in Chicago. In New York, we have almost 70 Islamic centers. They are the part of it. But in Malaysia, they have a national Shura. They call it the Malaysian Consultative Council of Islamic Organizations. So Ustaz Azmi, he is the president of that. He is also the Secretary General of Ulama Assembly of Asia. And he is the coordinator of ASEAN Coalition of Palestine. But very recently, they have also established ASEAN People's Advocacy Group for Kashmir. So Brother Ramit is our brother. You are disconnected. Let us wait just for a second. We will see, because he was on the line. Okay, if we have some technical problem, he is going to join us. Then I will invite very great scholar, Professor, please forgive me if I can not pronounce your name correctly, Sika Mania Siraj Abdullah. Brothers, I have his bio, which is just 25 pages. And if you want me to read it, inshallah, I can go, but I am sure that then no one is going to be speaking next. So he has been the Vice Chancellor of Uganda Islamic University, and he is the Professor of Department of Education. And in fact, he was introduced to me by a very close friend of mine, Ustaz Shamsuddin Turkan, who is really an authority on education. In fact, his books are being taught in the schools in Turkey. And Professor Abdullah, he has written more than 14 books, and he has written more than 100 research papers and attended more than a dozen international conferences. So Professor Abdullah, I think it is better for me to stop here. Inshallah, I am going to send you a resume to all the participants. They are going to know later, inshallah, who you are. But it is really a pleasure and honor to listen to you, and the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can you hear me, Dr. Ghulam?
Yes, we can hear you, alhamdulillah.
Okay, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. First and foremost, I wish to thank my dear brother, Dr. Ghulam, for the invitation, for the warm and for the nice words of introduction. Actually, I was at the Islamic University in Uganda until recently, just before lockdown, before the COVID lockdown. I returned to Malaysia, so currently I'm with the International Islamic University in Malaysia with the Faculty of Education. But my heart and my soul is in Uganda, of course. That's where I come from. It's a great pleasure, great opportunity to be part of this very important occasion. And I thank Dr. Ghulam Nabi Fai once again for sharing information about the current situation in Kashmir. We are talking about lockdown. We are sick from the 3 lockdown, but it is appalling to understand that the people of Kashmir have been in lockdown for a very, very long time. Now, as an educationist, I was looking at this and I was going through the report from the psychological perspective, and it's totally dehumanizing. I'm not a legal person, but I'm interested, and unfortunately, I haven't been able to join the meeting earlier on. But one thing I noticed is that if we look at the UN Genocide Convention of 1948, it talks about genocide being acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such, including the killing of its members, causing serious bodily or mental harm. Now, as a psychologist, mental aspect, the mental part is very, very important for me. And what is happening to me, I would categorize it as some kind of genocide. And it is unfortunate that many of us in the Muslim world are actually not aware of what has been going on. It's only with the efforts of this organization that we are coming to know, and it's very, very important. It's very important for us, and it's important for us in our capacities and in our organizations to make this known to all Muslims, because as we are taught in the very important hadith, in that Muslims, a Muslim, we should be like parts of the body, whereby if one part is sick, all the other parts will be facing the pain and fever. Now, being from Uganda, some of the members may be aware of where we have come from as Ugandans, and I can personally empathize with what is happening in Kashmir right now, because my whole life, this is what we have gone through. I was born just a few years before General Idi Amin became the president of Uganda, and we lived my first of childhood from 1971 to 1979. We lived under an embargo, an international embargo, where we weren't able to access the basic necessities of life. We couldn't access things like sugar, until to the extent that at one point, even fuel, petroleum had to be brought in by air, because all the neighboring countries were parts that were against the country. And during my childhood also, we faced a war, 1979. The country was attacked, and we saw things that people see in movies. We saw them live. We experienced death. I lost my own friends in primary school. I lost my teachers. And then we experienced the same civil war situation again, 1981, 1986. Now, why I'm telling you all this is that as a psychologist, I have gone through this, and I have seen what it does to people. I have seen lives being destroyed. I have seen people that I know being denied, deprived of a life, deprived of a living. And it has taken many years, almost 30 years from the end of the Civil War until now. People are struggling to recover. We have a lost generation. And when we continue with this kind of genocidal lockdown, it's going to have a long-term impact on the people of Kashmir. I add my voice to the speakers before, especially my brother Ibrahim Bulushi from Kenya, with whom we are directors of AFCOD, African Foundation for Educational and Community Development. I join his voice in the need to sensitize our people, and this is what we are going to go consider us ambassadors of Kashmir in our respective countries, in our respective institutions. We are going to raise the awareness. This is very important, because we need people to join in this condemnation of whatever is going on. We need many people to be aware of what is going on, to raise their voices, so that we can contribute to giving back the people of Kashmir what the kind of deserve. As an educator, educational psychologist, I've seen that children are losing very important things that that are important in their development. You know, talking about lack of basic resources, food, shelter, and most importantly, psychological safety, which is very, very. Now, in situations like this, children are going to be traumatized, and that trauma will take years and decades before we can overcome it. Some people have seen death, some people have lost family and friends, from what I read in the reports, and they are going to live with these nightmares for a very, very long time. The children have lost their childhood innocence. They have lost valuable education when you under this kind of lockdown, embargo, and such things. And all this is going to have a long-term psychological impact. Now, I'm not in a position to say what international organizations can do, but for us on our level, on the grassroots in community organizations, we are going to call upon whoever is representing us in organizations like the OIC to do the necessary, inshallah, to see that we can have some sort of justice to the people of Kashmir. Thank you once again, my dear brother, Dr. Gulam, and the respected speakers for the wonderful time. And inshallah, I hope that we will continue in some way or another this conversation offline after this meeting. Thanks once again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah, Professor Sirajudullah, may Allah bless you, inshallah. So we will meet you in Uganda and as well as in Malaysia, inshallah. So, dear brothers, just one second. Assalamualaikum, sir. Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum, sir. जी. साहब 3-4 मिनट में वो पब्लिश हो जाएंगे तो जरा कनेक्ट कर दें हमें। ठीक है, यहाँ से आप कोशिश करिए, आप भेजी हुई है। ठीक है। Dear brothers, we have the keynote speaker now, and as you know, the protocol is keynote speaker has to be the last. We still have 3-4 speakers, inshallah, but this August 4 and August 5, it is so hectic, so he has to attend another webinar. I mean here Ambassador Munir Akram. Ambassador Munir Akram is the Pakistan ambassador to the United Nations in New York. In fact, he has been the Pakistani ambassador to the United Nations in New York before also, and he has also been the Pakistani ambassador to United Nations in Geneva, and he has also been the Pakistani ambassador to the European Council in Belgium and Luxembourg, and he has been the president of the Security Council while being in New York as a Pakistan ambassador. As a member of the Security Council, he has been president of the Security Council twice, and he has also been the president of ECOSOC, which is a very important branch of United Nations Economic and Social Council. But to our delight that Ambassador Munir Akram, he was elected again last month to be the chairman of the ECOSOC again for next 2 years, inshallah. So he has also been the president of chairman of Group of 77. So to me, he is the real, genuinely international diplomat of Pakistan, and Pakistan is proud to have Ambassador Munir Akram in New York. And the people of Kashmir are really fortunate because he has been not leaving any stone unturned in the corridors of New York. So Ambassador Munir Akram, it's really our honor and pleasure to present to you to the webinar. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Faisal. Distinguished panelists, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. At the outset, I would like to commend the World Kashmir Awareness Forum for organizing today's webinar in solidarity with the people of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And I would also like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity for this intervention in this webinar. As you know, dear brothers and sisters, that tomorrow will mark 1 year since the new reign of oppression was unleashed by India on the Kashmiri people. This is a story of tears and tragedy. There are various aspects to this story and to the atrocities that are being committed in Indian-occupied Kashmir. And these have been covered by so many of the distinguished panelists at this webinar. The human rights tragedy, the oppression that is being conducted, the attempt by the Indian authorities to change the demography of Jammu and Kashmir, and the threat to peace and security which India's aggressive actions inside occupied Kashmir pose to the entire region. As I think the world knows Pakistan belongs to Kashmir, and Kashmir is part of the beating heart of Pakistan. We cannot be separated from each other, no matter what are the obstacles in our way. As Nelson Mandela once said, the nature of the struggle for freedom is determined by the oppressor, not by the oppressed. Mr. Modi has closed all doors to dialogue and a peaceful settlement of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, which the Security Council had determined would be decided by the people of Jammu and Kashmir through a free and fair plebiscite held under the auspices of the United Nations. Therefore, the oppressor has defined the nature of the struggle, and resistance to the oppressor is inevitable. We have therefore to devise a strategy which would defeat the aggressor, which would subvert the oppression in Jammu and Kashmir despite the strength of the oppressor, despite the 900,000 troops which have been deployed against the Kashmiris, 1 soldier to every 7 Kashmiris. What is the strategy? We have heard a lot of important and valuable suggestions from members of this panel, and I would like to offer some thoughts with that. I believe the strategy that we must follow, after 50 years that Kashmir has been in cold storage, after people spoke about putting Kashmir on the back burner between India and Pakistan, we have first and foremost to expose and inform the global public and our own people about the reality of the Kashmir issue, the legitimacy of the Kashmiri struggle for freedom, recognized by the Security Council and by the principles of the UN Charter. The atrocities which are happening in Kashmir that are beyond imagination, and the implications of this conflict for peace and security in South Asia and beyond. A confrontation between 2 large countries which are armed with nuclear weapons. So the first stage of information and exposure have been pursued by Pakistan and by our Kashmiri brothers, such as Dr. Fai and his organization and many others who have joined this struggle, to inform the world of what is happening. We took the matter to the Security Council on 16th of August last year, after 40 years. The Prime Minister of Pakistan came to the General Assembly and spoke on behalf of the oppressed Kashmiri people. We raised this issue in the Human Rights Council, which adopted a joint statement by over 50 countries expressing support for the cause of Kashmir. The second stage of the campaign has to be to seek the endorsement of the rights of the Kashmiris, of the legitimacy of their cause, to seek that endorsement from the peoples of the world and from the officials of the world. And this is the stage of the campaign in which Pakistan is at the moment, spreading the information about the Kashmir cause with the media, with academics, with civil society, with human rights organizations, with legislators in various parts of the world, and with the Security Council of the United Nations. Just yesterday, I have sent to the Security Council 2 documents. One, which outlines the legal case of Kashmir for the record of the Security Council, the legitimacy of the cause, the basis for the right of self-determination, the legitimacy of the struggle for self-determination. These have all been spelled out in this paper, which will be circulated as an official document of the Security Council. We have also circulated a document categorizing the human rights violations that are taking place in Jammu and Kashmir. This is a comprehensive compendium of the atrocities that are taking place in Kashmir and will serve to inform the governments of the world and the peoples of the world of the reality that we are facing, that the Kashmiri people are facing in the world today. The third stage of our struggle, of our campaign, will be to convince governments of the rights of the Kashmiris, of the legitimacy of the cause, of the need to support that cause rather than oppose it, as some have done in the past. It is the most difficult part of the campaign, because decisions not on the basis. What are the reasons that governments have been reticent to condemn the actions and to uphold the rights of the Kashmiri people? In my view, there are 3 elements of why governments have been reticent. The first is geopolitics. Some powers which see India as an ally, perhaps an ally against China. The second reason is economic, where countries, advanced industrial countries, see opportunities in India, opportunities for trade, opportunities for investment. And this is which guides their policies. And the third is the campaign which India, which is a large country, the campaign which they pursue to support various smaller countries and states in the world with economic assistance and so forth in order to influence their positions. We need to change these policies, and therefore we need to change the reasons in taking positions. This change will happen for 2 reasons. Firstly, it will change from the strength of the Kashmiri struggle. It will change when India realizes that it is unable, despite its capacity and oppression, to impose its will on the Kashmiri people. And secondly, it will change when India sees the damage in Jammu and Kashmir are causing to its own economic interests, to its strategic interests, and to its reputational interests. The sky is the darkest before dawn. Today, the balance of forces is changing, and that balance of force is changing towards the rights of peoples such as Kashmir and Palestine who are under oppression. As far as Kashmir is concerned, must consider the following. Firstly, resistance remains robust despite the suffering that have been imposed Kashmiris, the political prisoners, the who have been incarcerated in jails across India, despite the collective punishments, despite the extrajudicial killing, Kashmiri has not been Pakistan remains resolute. Pakistan will not desert the Kashmiri struggle, no matter how difficult we face the pressures from India or from other parts. We have remained steadfast and we will remain steadfast in supporting the Kashmiri. The Indian economy is going to contract, going to diminish over according to present estimates due to the and this is to and India's attraction as an investment destination and as an economic partner is going to recede further as it builds walls, economic walls against trade and investment from its neighbors and from other countries. Fourthly, strategically, the recent events in Ladakh have exposed India as a paper tiger with clay feet. It is powerful when it is talking to a smaller country such as Nepal or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or even Pakistan. But when faced by superior strength, it goes completely mute. Now, Mr. Amit Shah does not say that Aksai Chin is a part of India, as he did before. And similarly, the Indian foreign minister now says that India will have no alliances and that it will not be an ally of certain great powers which want India to confront China. Fifthly, and perhaps most importantly, India is in the process of damaging itself. The BJP RSS government is a divisive government, and it has taken the veil out of the hypocrisy that existed before in the form of secularism in India. And in this context, let me quote from an Indian writer, Arundhati Roy, who has summed up the issue in the following words, and I quote, India has always functioned as an upper caste Hindu state. But the conceit of secularism hypocritical though it may be, is the only shard of coherence that makes India possible. That hypocrisy was the best thing we had. Without it, India will end. Unquote. Dear brothers and sisters, unless the Modi government goes, India is put on a path of division and discord. It is the Indian people who themselves will recognize sooner rather than later that Modi must go. The arc of history, as Martin Luther King said, is long, but it bends towards justice. I believe that in the case of Kashmir, it will eventually bend towards justice. There has been no freedom struggle, no legitimate freedom struggle in the history of the world which has failed. And I am convinced that the struggle of the Kashmiri people is just, is legitimate, and that it will not fail. I thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Ambassador Munir Akram Saab. As you said, the Kashmir struggle continues, inshallah. The people of Kashmir will never compromise. That is the testimony we are getting every single day from the streets of Kashmir. So, dear brothers, as we had some technical issue, Muhammad Azmi Abdul Hamid. By the way, we have, mashallah, our keynote speaker is here, President Azad, Jammu and Kashmir. He just joined us. So we have Brother Azmi, then inshallah we have the keynote speaker. Brother Muhammad Azmi Abdul Hamid, as I was just telling you, that in America we have a lot of Shura councils, New York, Washington, Chicago. But in Malaysia, they have a national Shura council. They call it Malaysian Consultative Council of Islamic Organizations. So they have been deeply involved in many Muslim issues, particularly at the ASEAN. They had an ASEAN Coordination Council for Palestine, but very recently, alhamdulillah, we are really pleased to know they have a coordination committee at the ASEAN for the advocacy of Kashmir. So, Brother Ustaz Azmi Abdul Hamid, it's a pleasure to listen to you. And we are sorry, we had some technical issue, but the floor is yours, inshallah.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thank you, Dr. Ghulam, the host. Thank you, everybody, and His Excellency, the President of AJK, Mr. Masood Khan, my brother, Dr. Mohammad Nurmanovi, and the rest of the panelists. Briefly, I think I would just say a few words on this, that the issue of Kashmir is basically about an issue of denying the rights and denying the legitimacy of a nation. What India has done is to erase the existence of Kashmir as a sovereign territory. It is a disputed territory, no doubt, but it is a sovereign nation in the narrative of history, and that cannot be denied. Now, what we are seeing now is the arrogance of India and the way that India is playing around the world of trying to justify what it has done to Kashmir and why it is continuing to occupy Kashmir and even to take over the whole of the disputed territory. And now I'm impressed with all the ideas and what we call proposals that what we need to do. First and foremost, I would like to say that this is about the unity of the Ummah. It has to start and it has to be based on that. Kashmir, no doubt, we are talking about the humanitarian or the human rights, which is universal, but in essence, the majority of the Muslims have been denied of their rights, and therefore India is ignoring and is trying to do what they call demographic change on a territory. Now, this is very clear that the majority Muslims in Kashmir has become the target of India. And that is why we are very aware and we are we are clear about the agenda of India. It's not just about a territory, it's about the population profile. And they want to continue their occupation with a justification that since there is now a move that the population is changing because of the domicile regulation has been introduced, we know that their strategy now is towards that. Now, the unity of the Ummah is the essence of this struggle. Every and each of individuals of Muslim must come to a conclusion that this is not just about the Kashmiris struggling to survive, the Kashmiris trying to make sure that they can exist, but this is about the rights of the Muslims existing in a country of their own. And we are very, we stand in solidarity on that. But we also know that the issue is about international justice, it's about international peace, it's about regional stability. And therefore, India cannot always, keep on repeating that this is internal matter. This is about Pakistan and India, which has already always been repeated by India. That is not the case. We know very well that this is beyond that. This is about a country occupying another country and trying to legalize it in their own way, and then they ignore the resolutions of the multilateral agencies like the UN, and therefore their excuse of not letting other people to say about the Kashmiris cause is false. We stand in solidarity with Kashmir all out in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Thailand. We are struggling to get everybody on board, and we are doing that in a way that we want to convince the legislators and governments of ASEAN, for instance, that this is about human rights. This is about regional peace. And if you have an unstable region on that side, then definitely there will be the implication to other regions. And that is why we are calling for the world to take action on India, because the root cause of it is the Indian occupation. That's the essence of it. What they are doing is to tell the world that nobody can challenge them. They want to continue with this occupation, and therefore they say to the world, they say to Malaysia, they say to everybody, saying that this is nothing to do with you. And that is why when Tun Mahathir, our former prime minister, said about this, that what India is doing is illegal. This is not in accordance with the resolution, and therefore we are calling to India to come back to this. This is a legal resolution. This is something that is logical, and there's a basis for it. But when India just ignored it, Tun Mahathir expressed his position that India should stop this the brutality, the atrocities, and they must come back to refer to what has been agreed at the international level. Ending to my short speech is that what we need to do is both from the bottom up and top down. When I say bottom up, is that I always talk about rallying people from the grassroots everywhere in the countries of ASEAN or outside of ASEAN throughout the world. We have sentiments of uniting in this cause of Kashmiris, but we have to make people understand. So the basic institution of this is the mosque, the masjid. All over the country, all over the world, we have at least 4.5 million masjid. Those are our powerhouses. Those are our institutions that we have to rally people to get them to feel this issue of Kashmir. And then I say also about the top down. We have to talk to legislators of every country. As what was said by the ambassador just now, is that, we have to get endorsement from as many countries, from legislators around the world, that they must stand in solidarity and they must endorse the struggle of Kashmiris. And this is important because it legitimizes the demands of the Kashmiris. We cannot allow only the voices of Kashmiris. We have to have a combined forces of voices all around the world, especially those who are making policies. My end part of this speech is that we are calling to every countries all around the world that Kashmir should be a center stage of the world aside from Palestine. These are equal countries that have been devastated, that have been denied of their rights, and we have to see Kashmir and Palestine as a one struggle. And therefore, whenever we talk about Palestine, never forget Kashmir as part of the struggle that we should demand for liberation and give back the rights of the people of Kashmir. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum assalam, Ustad Admi. God bless you. Thank you very much. As you said, we are one ummah, so we have to listen to each other. We have to feel the pain of each other. I just want to know if Dr. Imtiaz Khan is on the line. You send me the text, yes. Dr. Imtiaz Khan. So the reason I am calling Dr. Imtiaz Khan because Dr. Imtiaz Khan, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Yeah, that's okay. We cannot see you, but that's not important. So, dear brothers, we have a joint statement, which is for the first time that it has been endorsed by 56 global Kashmiri organizations from 5 continents. From 5 continents, inshallah. So, this has been endorsed by 56 global Kashmiri organizations. Dr. Imtiaz Khan is going to read it, inshallah. Dr. Imtiaz Khan, we can hear you. You can go ahead, inshallah.
Okay. On August 5, 2019, the government of India laid bare its naked ambition extant since partition in 1947 to brutally colonize the territories of Jammu and Kashmir. On that date, it threw away any pretense of acknowledging the J&K's right to self-determination as outlined by the United Nations Security Council and agreed to at that time by the government of India 72 years earlier. The events of August 5, 2019 are consistent with the ruthless occupation and suppression the people of Kashmir have suffered under the unpopular Indian rule. As is widely acknowledged and documented internationally, this brutal occupation has led to 150,000 civilian deaths, more than 8,000 individuals missing or disappeared, and thousands of Kashmiri women raped. This does not even begin to account for the tens of thousands tortured, maimed, and permanently injured men, women, and children by the Indian security forces during their 72-year reign of terror. But despite this persistent and pernicious tyranny, the people of Kashmir never have nor never will give up their right to be free. It is based on this internationally recognized and principled stand the Kashmiri diaspora and its allies worldwide stand in solidarity with Jammu and Kashmir people. We stand in support of their unyielding struggle to resist occupation and achieve their right to self-determination. We stand with them in their struggle to stop the Indian government from dehumanizing them and completing their settler colonial project to remove them culturally, politically, and ethnically from the face of the earth. Since August 5, 2019, the Indian government, in order to crush any resistance to their illegal occupation, has instituted new draconian measures. Firstly, they unilaterally removed any relics of initial recognition of their occupation by abrogating Article 370 and 35A of the Indian Constitution, imposed a total military lockdown and complete communication blockade in anticipation of the protest and resistance these measures would inevitably cause. In a ruthless campaign, they imprisoned politicians, journalists, and civil society members to intimidate and suppress any form of dissent. Since then, they have unleashed a well-designed imperialistic plan that seeks to forever change the political nature of the Kashmir dispute through demographic changes, political maneuverings, and administrative machinations. These alterations to J&K's disputed nature were simply capped by new domicile laws that would entitle people from outside of Jammu and Kashmir to obtain domicile certificates as the first step towards granting them the right to buy land and compete for local jobs. The Indian rulers have sought to shamelessly disregard that these unilateral changes made to the UN recognized international dispute status are a clear violation of international law. The consequences of these actions have been dire, with the people of J&K being essentially forced to be locked in their homes, terrorized by the Indian military and paramilitary forces with no recourse against this oppression. According to a recent report spanning first 6 months of 2020, prepared by J&K Coalition of Civil Society and the Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons, the army action has resulted in 229 killings, including 3 underage children and 2 women. During the brutal cordon and destroy operations, the occupying forces have destroyed hundreds of civilian dwellings, rendered their occupant homeless. Amnesty International has reported that disappearances, torture, and rape against Kashmiri Muslims are frequent. Genocide Watch has identified the actions of the government of India as a precursor to a likely genocide of the Kashmiri people. It is with this in the mind that we appeal to all people of conscience and the international community to raise their voices against the brutal oppression of people of Jammu and Kashmir are suffering under the occupying forces of the government of India. We urge them to demand that India take following steps. First, immediately lift the year-long military siege, restore all internet connectivity and communication links, and release all political prisoners, including underage children, journalists, and civil society members. Second, allow unfettered access to monitor and report on human rights violations by credible international bodies, including Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, International Federation for Human Rights, World Organization Against Torture, Doctors Without Borders, Physicians for Human Rights, and UN Special Rapporteur on Torture and other UN thematic rapporteurs. Third, halt and rescind all laws, such as domicile laws, that have been instituted to speed the demographic changes and promote the ethnic, cultural, and political cleansing of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Number 4 is disarm and withdraw all Indian military and paramilitary personnel from the occupied territories so that all the people in Jammu and Kashmir can exercise their unfettered right of self-determination through a free and fair referendum as agreed to by both the governments of India and Pakistan, as well as the United Nations Security Council as early as 1948. And there are 56 endorsing Kashmiri diaspora organizations from these 5 continents who have endorsed this statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Imtiaz Khan. So we are going to release this joint statement, inshallah, to the press soon after this webinar, inshallah. So, dear brothers and sisters, our keynote speaker, I am sure that all of you know of President Masood Khan Saab. So he has been the Pakistan ambassador to Geneva and Pakistan ambassador to the United Nations in New York. And he has also been the Pakistan ambassador to China, which is really very important portfolio for any Pakistani diplomat to be the ambassador in China. But besides that, he has also been the spokesman of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan. And while in Geneva, he has held many important posts. He was the chairman of International Organization of Migration. He was the chairman of Group 77 at Geneva. and the chairman of Government Group of International Labour Organization, ILO, and Conference of Disarmament, and more importantly, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which then was Organization of Islamic Conference. But it's an honor for the nation of Kashmir that we have really a genuine international diplomat who is pleading the case of Kashmir, not only in on the corridors of Islamabad, but at very important capitals of the world. And to my understanding, if I am not mistaken, within the past 4 or 5 months, so I have seen him attending at least more than 50 webinars on Kashmir. And today, I think it may be third or fourth, so he is joining us. So Ambassador and President, obviously today the President of Azad Jammu Kashmir, so he is going to speak today. As the President of Azad Kashmir, it's a really honor and pleasure, President Saab, to present to you to the webinar, and the floor is yours. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. You have to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable Dr. Ghulam Nabi Fai, other distinguished participants, Assalamu alaikum from Muzaffarabad, the capital of Azad Jammu and Kashmir. First, I want to apologize to you for appearing late in this webinar. And the reason is that I was traveling from Islamabad to Muzaffarabad. I had to participate in a series of events there, and therefore accept my apologies for this delay. And this deprived me of listening to many distinguished participants today. That's entirely my loss. The second thing that I want to say is that Dr. Ghulam Nabi Fai, I bow my head in respect and appreciation for what you've been doing year after year, decade after decade, in the United States and across the globe to promote and protect the right to self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And you are our proven leader in the United States. You live in the hearts and minds of the Kashmiri people, whether they are in Azad Kashmir or they are in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So I salute you. I begin my remarks by saluting you. And I know that you have suffered privation. I know that you have been persecuted, but you have always been very steadfast in your commitment to the liberty, freedom, and self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So it's a pleasure to talk in your presence. And thank you so much for hosting this seminar on the eve of the anniversary of India's invasion and occupation of the territory. Second compliment that I want to give is to Mr. Muhammad Azmi. You know, Mr. Muhammad Azmi, the chairperson, president of MAPAM, has opened many new doors for Kashmiris. In fact, he is a trendsetter. He came to Azad Kashmir and he established relationship between Azad Kashmir and Kuala Lumpur, Azad, in Malaysia. And that was not all. In fact, he mobilized public opinion in all the ASEAN parliaments. He led an ASEAN delegation which came to Islamabad and Muzaffarabad, and he connected Kashmiris with Malaysia. He also facilitated my meeting with our revered Prime Minister, Mahathir Mohamad, also the Vice President and the Foreign Minister and the Minister for Health, and the entire leadership, the entire political spectrum of Malaysia. I had the opportunity to present my case to them, so I'm thankful to you. But in fact, he presides over a network all over the world. It's a powerful network, and he's a peacemaker, he's a peace builder, and therefore, I also salute you, Dr. Muhammad Azmi, for what you have done for Kashmir. You know, when I went to Kuala Lumpur and Putrajaya early this year, he had already formed a Friends of Kashmir group, and he had tapped into the strengths of the Malaysian youth. Not only that, he had established these parliamentary groups in all the 10 ASEAN parliaments. So he created a network, a virtual network and a physical network for the support of the Kashmiris. Thank you so much, Dr. Azmi, for doing that. Now, I missed what Ambassador Munir Akram said. I mean, I joined the webinar when he was concluding his remarks, but it is always a feast to listen to him. Now, if you ask me today, on the eve of August the 5th, I would say put demographic changes on top of the agenda, any agenda that you have right now. Of course, I mean, Kashmir was occupied in 1947. Of course, India has been brutalizing the people of Jammu and Kashmir for the past 73 years. Yes, year after year, Kashmiris have been giving sacrifices. And we have pinned our hopes on the sagacity and stewardship of the United Nations Security Council to resolve this thorny and complex issue. But right now, what I want to say is that it is imperative that we put the issue of Jammu and Kashmir with reference to the demographic changes on top of the agenda. Let me tell you that in this past year, 5 things have happened. And these are all very important. First thing is that on August the 5th last year, 900,000 occupation forces invaded and reoccupied the occupied territory and deprived it of all its trappings of a state. The constitution, the flag, the assembly was dissolved a year earlier. And then it laid a siege, a punitive siege against the people of Jammu and Kashmir and on the territory of the occupied area. So, and the second thing was that immediately after the siege, it incarcerated thousands of young boys and children and put them in concentration camps. People tend to forget these things, but those boys are still rotting in cramped concentration camps where they are being indoctrinated, where they're being tortured. And some of these young boys were as young as 10, 11, and 12. And Bipin Rawat, the CDS, Chairman Defense Staff, he said that these boys, 10, 12, 10, 11, 12-year-old boys, they are more sinister, more dangerous than the pellet-firing shotguns because they chant the slogan of Azadi. And of course, our top leadership, the true leadership, Sayyid Ali Gilani, Yasin Malik, Asya Indrabi, Shabir Shah, Musarat Alam Bhat, dozens of other, Mir Waiz Umar Farooq, and dozens other, scores of political activists and leaders are incarcerated. The third thing that happened, and this happened on October the 31st and November the 1st, was that the Indian government annexed the territory, the occupied territory, with the Indian Federation. They call it the Indian Union. And they claimed sovereignty over this disputed territory. They divided the territory into 2 parts and called it Ladakh Union Territory and Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory. And this was all done without the consent of the people of Jammu and Kashmir because the assembly had been dissolved. And they established a direct writ on these areas from New Delhi. This was, of course, a crime against humanity. I'll come to that later. And this year, starting April, they passed laws or rules which are called new domicile rules, which authorize the Indian occupation authorities to import and transfer hundreds of thousands of Hindus from all over India and settle them illegally in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Let me tell you the scale and the speed. Everything has been put on fast track. As I speak to you today, 400,000 Indians, mostly Hindus, have been settled in the territory. They've been issued domicile certificates. And let me tell you that the formula is that these Hindus, the ex-armed personnel, or the civil servants who served in universities or banks or statutory bodies, or they have served in public sector entities in any form, in any role, if they have lived from 10 to 15 years in the territory, and it doesn't have to be a continuous period, they all qualify to be settled in the occupied territory. Now, you would recall that last year, Article 35A had been rescinded. That article recognized 4 basic fundamental rights. First was permanent residence. Second was acquisition of property. Third was privileges relating to educational scholarships. And fourth was privileges related to employment in the public sector. All of these rights, recognized even before the Indian occupation, they were recognized in 1927, they were taken away. And these new domicile rules give all these rights to the Hindus, to the non-natives, non-Kashmiris, who are being imported in busloads from Bihar and other parts of India, from Maharashtra and Rajasthan and Delhi and Haryana and Bengal. They're being transported to the Indian territory. That's not all, to the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. That's not all. They are giving the status to hundreds of thousands of migrant workers who are already present in the occupied territory, to the sanitation workers, to the so-called West Pakistan refugees. So the total volume that we are seeing of the present and serving officers and their families and their children, and the ones who served in Kashmir as occupation forces, as part of occupation authorities, the total number would be around 5 to 6 million. But because of this accelerated pace, it is possible that in the next 2 years, there would be induction of 2 to 3 million non-natives settling in Kashmir. That's not all. What they're doing is that they have authorized the armed forces of India to declare any part of Kashmir as strategic and acquire it and construct housing complexes, illegal settlements, like the settlements you see in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And these, then they have earmarked dozens of places where they would establish these industrial estates. You know, the businesses that the people of Jammu and Kashmir used to have, for instance, the business of businesses around these rivers, there was this economy revolving around rivers that has been taken away from the Kashmiris, and that has been given to Biharis, Hindus from Bihar and other parts of India. So it's kind of evisceration, complete evisceration of a population or of their rights. So what is happening right now is that what you're seeing is total disenfranchisement, dispossession, disempowerment, and displacement. This is what is happening in Kashmir right now. So I say that we do not have the luxury of time. If we do not act now, it would be too late. 2 years from now, there would be no Kashmir to save. There would be no Kashmir for advocacy, but there would be no time for invocation of the United Nations Security Council and international law. The fifth thing that is happening is merciless, brutal killings of Kashmiri youth every day. They're killed in these coordinate search and coordinate destroy operations. Houses are blasted. Young men are killed. Sometimes, well, most of the time, they're killed in fake and staged encounters. So our generation is being wiped out, eliminated. According to Genocide Watch, which is an organization based in the United States, it says that Kashmir has entered into the last stage or last phase of genocide. And what's that phase? It is the phase of extermination. The crimes that are being committed in the occupied territory are crimes against humanity, genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crimes. And the applicable law is known to everybody. It is the Fourth Geneva Convention. It is the Convention on Torture, a Convention on Discrimination. There are three principles in international law. You do not kill non-combatants. You do not kill civilians. There are no terrorists there. According to India's own count, or the count of the police force or the security forces, the number of militants is 300, pitted against 900,000 soldiers. So whenever there is a conflict situation, according to international humanitarian law, you have to observe three principles. One is of distinction. You have to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants. The second is precaution. You have to take precaution. And the third is proportionality. If somebody throws a stone at you, you do not use live ammunition, for God's sake, or you do not use pellet firing shotguns direct in the eyes of your target. All these principles, humanitarian principles, are being trampled in the occupied territory. There are also these conventions in regard to the rights of women. There are also the two covenants, as a matter of fact, the international covenants dating back to the 1960s, which guaranteed the right to self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. There is also ICC statute. There is also additional protocol 1, several UN Security Council resolutions, soft international law, hard international law, customary international law. They make India accountable on all counts. And the evidence is there, despite all these restrictions, despite what they call security lockdown and communication blockade, the evidence is there. India has also threatened Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan with a war. And Narendra Modi, their Prime Minister, has said that he would not hesitate to use nuclear weapons against Pakistan. And Rajnath Singh has said that he too would encourage his armed forces to use nuclear weapons against Pakistan. So this is brinkmanship. This is a toxic brew, for God's sake. India has unleashed 3 wars. The first war is against all its neighbors. All its neighbors: China, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. The second war is the war against its own citizens, Muslims in particular, Sikhs, Buddhists, Christians in particular, Dalits, 250 million Dalits. They are considered subhuman species by the BJP and Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh and Hindu extremist organizations. And the third war, the most lethal war, is against the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So India is an artificial entity now, because the glue that joined India as a federation was secularism. They've taken off that mask. And now you see this horrendous face of religious, violent extremism. Let me also tell you, and let me talk about the way forward. I think that what I want to underline here is that the United Nations, and pardon me for my cynicism or realism or candor, whatever you choose to call it, What I want to tell you is that the United Nations is not going to give you a just dispensation. And I can say this with some authority and experience because I was Pakistan's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York in 2012, 2013. And I was the last ambassador to represent Pakistan in the Security Council. And I also had the privilege of presiding over the Security Council. So I know because of realpolitik, you will not get justice there because for veto holders, the United States, the UK, France, Russian Federation, they are not going to support you. China facilitated a meeting of the Security Council on Kashmir last year at the request of Pakistan, and 3 sessions have been held, informal sessions behind the scenes, but without producing a product, without a presidential statement. So what I'm saying is that UN will not give you just dispensation unless you take your international movement to a critical point. If you don't do that, UN would equivocate, it would dissimulate, and it would issue these very ambiguous, artificially balanced statements, encumbered with caveats and qualifications. They would say that yes, the Secretary General is ready to play the role of mediation, provided, and here the real barrier starts, provided India and Pakistan agree or concur. Why would India agree? It is trying to hide its crimes. Why would it agree to mediation? It says it's an internal problem. Killing Kashmiris is an internal problem. So I would say that we must enlist the support of the international civil society. We must reach out to the grassroots communities all around the world. Parliaments were mobilized last year. The US Congress last year, its committees broke a taboo when it convened and held hearings and heard first-hand testimonies about crimes that India was committing. And the European Parliament tabled half a dozen resolutions. Some 650 European parliamentarians, they tabled resolutions. And ASEAN parliaments were being activated by Honorable Mohammad Azmi. Parliaments are important. Councillors are important. Think tanks and human rights organizations are important. I have been making this proposal on a number of occasions, and I want to repeat them, that we have to start a boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against India. When I was in the United States, I spoke to multiple audiences and to the corporate leaders, and I said, don't underwrite India's tyranny in the occupied territory. And I spoke to these big industrialists, and I said, don't sell this weaponry that kills Kashmiris. Do you have any enmity with Kashmiris? So why do you empower the Indian government to kill Kashmiris? Proactive. And we should say that it's not Pakistan which is a terrorist. Kashmiris are not terrorists. If a Kashmiri picks up a gun, he tries to defend his home, his neighborhood, his homeland. This is no terrorism. We do not have a large number of people who are doing that in Kashmir. 300, according to Dilbagh Singh, who is the Director General of the Director General Police of the occupied territory. So there should be another campaign which should demand that the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, with a membership of 6 million Archariks or members, they are indoctrinating their people. They are inciting hatred. They are targeting minorities. Muslims in particular. They're targeting Kashmiris, Kashmiri Muslims. Kashmiri Muslims on the verge of elimination, for God's sake. Let's start a campaign and take this campaign to the appropriate forums for the declaration designation of Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh, which is the external wing of Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, as a terrorist organization. This vicious network must be broken, because what they represent is reincarnation of fascism, this time in the garb of Hindu supremacy or Hindutva. We should also, we should start a digital campaign all around the world. And in that campaign, we should use new media, digital media, and new technologies. Let me also tell you that while we strive for the self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, the world order is crumbling. It is not what it used to be in the 1950s or 1960s. The United Nations has been sidelined, even during the COVID-19 pandemic. United Nations usually makes these moralizing, didactic statements. That's all. I mean, sometimes one feels that their real function is climate change or sustainable development and not peace and security. So what I'm saying is that we are facing many challenges, and against this backdrop, you see the valor of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, the bravest people on the face of the earth, who have pinned down 900,000 troops armed to the teeth with no weapon in their hands. So let me tell you, in conclusion my remarks, let me tell you that there is a new vigor and passion in Azad Kashmir and in Pakistan and in the diaspora community to work hard and more intelligently and with more unity for the liberty, freedom, and self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. We will not do it alone. The diaspora community will not do it alone. Nor would we, the people of Azad Kashmir or Pakistan. We need friends all over the world. And in that context, I think Dr. Ghulam Nabi Fai, others, anchors that we have, friends that we have all over the world, we would rely on you. Let me also tell you that the BJP and RSS are a dark, evil force. And, you know, when I was listening to this communique that you're issuing, you are addressing many appeals to this force, this dark force, which is terrorizing the people of the community. My own experience is that they would spurn these demands. They have not responded to the demand made by Michelle Bachelet, High Commissioner for Human Rights, or the Vice General, or the United Nations Secretary General. So the last point that I want to make here is that for sustainable, reliable, credible conflict resolution in regard to Kashmir, or to give justice to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, we have to create our own ecosystem. And I know that Mr. Muhammad Azmi knows it and understands it. If we do not have our ecosystem, we would be seeking justice from the people who have, in fact, enforced injustice in the first place. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, President Khan, for your voice of the nation of Kashmir as a group of activities. Almighty Allah is the great, and as you said, we have the friends like Brother Azmi, Professor Murti, and Dr. and also President of and Vice President from Arabia, he was to conclude the webinar. Dr. Mir, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, now I can. Sorry, I couldn't hear you there.
Can you conclude?
Yes, I would be happy to do it. Thank you all so very much, the distinguished excellencies, including the President of Azad Kashmir, our professors, scholars, and leaders in the community of the nations. It was so great to hear your words of support for Kashmir. We noted the recommendations you made, and WKA Forum is going to work hard on realizing those goals and targets. And hopefully in the next meeting, you'll hear some of the accomplishments we may be able to achieve. We're hoping to reach all those targets, and we're going to launch hopefully a robust campaign of advocacy and information. And thanks once again for being with us and making this conference successful. May Allah bless you, may Allah guide you, and keep you safe. Thank you on behalf of Kashmiris and WKA.
Okay, let us make سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
عليكم السلام.